The feeling that the applause is for Kumi and not for me. This is Kumi, and this is his keeper, Mick Carman, from the London Zoo. And Kumi's a 8-month-old male chimpanzee, and I think rather frightened by all these lights. Now, just like yourself and myself, Kumi comes from a single fertilized egg. And Kumi is very like you and me. And look, he's got, doesn't like that. You can see he's got very nice hands, got nice long arms. And if you look at Kumi's face, if he's not too shy, he'll turn around just now. There we are. Kumi's got a very nice face. I would say unlike mine in many ways. And that's the problem. You see, if we sort of had to look at inside Kumi, you'd see that the cell types from which Kumi is made are exactly the same types as those cells from which I'm made. See, I'd love to be able to say, I've got a cell type that makes me different from Kumi. I'm afraid it's just not true. And I'm afraid it's also true of you. You have no cell type that Kumi hasn't got. He's got all the sort of building blocks as far as the different kinds of cells as we have. You know, he's got hair cells, he's got skin cells, he's got bone cells, he's got muscle cells. So they're all extremely similar. So the puzzle is then, why does Kumi not look like me, or why don't I look like Kumi? And that's one of the problems that I'm going to talk about today, because in more general terms, don't think just of Kumi, but think of birds, alligators, fish, giraffes. On the whole, they're not quite like Kumi and me. They do have cell types which are slightly different to us, but the real difference doesn't lie in those cell types, but how they're put together. It's a problem of spatial organization. And I'm going to try and argue that the difference between Kumi and you and me is one of spatial organization and how the blocks are put together. Kumi, thank you very much indeed for coming. I hope he's enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, you'll remember that one of our problems is for Frankenstein to build an angel. And in this lecture, I want to talk about what sort of messages cells might have to pass each other in order, for example, to construct a wing. Now, if you remember last time, we spoke about forces. It was really about sculpting the embryo, and it was a question of what sort of forces cells used in order to fold sheets, rather like we had in origami. What I didn't tell you, and what Frankenstein never learned, was where you actually fold the sheet. And that's the problem that I'm going to talk about today. It's a problem of knowing where to make the folds rather than the forces doing the actual folding. And if the last lecture was about sculpting, then this one, or a molding, this one is more about painting. And so it's really a question of where to fold and how to paint the colors in. And I think you might get a feel of this if we have a look at this movie from the 30s where dancers move about to form rather nice patterns. And you can have a sense of those might be cells, rather pretty cells, who do rather simple movements and make rather beautiful patterns. And if you were one of those dancers, and you might think of them as cells, you might say, well, how do you know when to do something and where to do it? Because you see the movements are really rather simple, but give rather complicated patterns just from moving arms and moving legs. And how do you know what to do? How do they know what to do? Now, One way of thinking about that is to think of it in terms of just using some quite simple building blocks. You can think of red, white, and blue building blocks, and one can make all sorts of patterns with these, depending upon how I arrange them. And just using, if you think of these as cells turning into white and red and blue, one can really make some quite simple patterns and make some quite complicated patterns. And the first thing that I want to have a look at are some rather simple patterns which have nothing to do with biology, but at least which you will recognize. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. Thank you very much. Very well hosted. As you can see here, you've got two well-known flags, the Stars and Stripes and the Union Jack, and they're just made up of blocks of white, red, and blue. Now you may well say, what on earth, flags? What have flags got to do with embryos and patterning? And I'll try and show you that. If we have a look at the frog embryo, after it's divided about 4 or 5 times, it's made up of a ball of cells, and you can see the individual cells here. And one of the first things we have to ask is, what do these different cells give rise to? Which are the cells that are going to give rise, for example, to the nose or the arm or the eye? And how can we find that out? And the way we can do that is in the first instance of looking at a model here. This is, of course, a football. It's not a frog embryo, it's a model of that frog embryo, but rather nice because the patches here we can think of as representing cells. Now, the bottom here is painted yellow. And the reason why it's painted yellow is because that's the yolky part of the embryo, and that tends to sit bottom down like that. So this is the top part of the embryo, and that's the more yolky part. And frog eggs are like that, as we'll see in a movie just now. Now, say we wanted to know what one of these cells was going to develop into. Say we wanted to know what this cell was normally going to develop into. Well, what we could do is we could inject into it a fluorescent dye. So let's do that, and let's make that fluorescent. And then we can ask, what's that going to develop into? And we can trace it through development. And I'm going to try and illustrate how one might trace that through development. Because what I've got here are some glow sticks. Now, I'm going to give you, hold on, I'm going to give you 4, now I need lots more. 4, 6, 8. I'm going to tell you what to do with them in a moment. Give you a couple more. Now, what I want you to do, let me tell you what I want you to do. I want you to pass all of them except one to someone behind you, and when you've passed it, the one you've got left, just bend it and break it. Don't do it too violently, but you'll see what happens. And then the person behind you'll get some. Would you pass that back to the person behind you, keeping one, and just bend the one that you have? Would you do that, please? So pass all except one. And will you break it, please? There you are, and hold it up. That's it. Not too violent. And there you have, in a way, what we've had from the embryo, a trail of fluorescence. We can think of that as the developing embryo and the trail of fluorescence moving back, and we can see actually where that first cell ends up, right at the back there. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so we can now think of that in relation to this embryo here, and to this frog embryo here. And here we have a fluorescent spot, and if we shine an ultraviolet light on it, then I think you'll be able to see it quite nicely. Can you shine that? So there's the fluorescent marker on the cell here, and what I can tell you is that if you put it there in the frog embryo, what it will develop into, what if you actually looked at me, it will develop into the eye. And that's what actually happens in the frog, is that this cell here will give rise to a whole group of cells that develop into the eye. Now, that's what they will normally do. But do they really have their fate committed? Is their future really determined? Is there nothing else that they become? Have all job opportunities closed towards them? Well, let's find out. What would happen if we took some of those cells that were going to become the eye and we grafted them into the region down here, which in fact I know is going to become the belly? What's going to happen to them? And just let me show you how one can do that operation. Here it is over here. Here are some frog embryos, and you can see the yolky parts underneath, so they have to be turned over in order to get access to the yolky part. And here are some cells being grafted with a fine pipette from here into another part of the embryo, rather shaky pipette being put in, but it's very difficult because it's handheld and they're really quite small. Now, if you do that at this early stage of development, if you take the cells from here and put them into a new position in the belly, they don't become eye cells, they become belly cells. Okay? So their future isn't determined. They have other job opportunities open to them, and they can become belly cells. You may think that that's going down in the world, but from their point of view, I don't think it is the case. However, are options always open? Is it like life? Are options always open? Can you always change your career? And the answer is, well, let's see. What will happen if at a later stage, when this embryo has been developing for a little while longer, and now I take these eye cells and I put them down here, will they still take on the character of the cells around them? And the answer is no, they won't. And what in fact you'll get is a little eye sitting quite functionless and useless in the middle of the belly. The cells have now been committed to their career, and virtually nothing can change them. And they developed in an eye in the frog's belly here, just because that's what they're committed to doing. Okay. Now, since the cells can change their career and their future by being put in here, you do have a sense that the cells are behaving according to their position. They know where they are, and that's why they change their future. And in order to illustrate this to you, I want to play a game, and the game is called the French flag game. And for this game, I need 24 volunteers. No, wait a minute, wait, just slowly. If you put up your hands, and I'll pick some of you out. Will you come down? Will you come down? The girl in the red there, come down. Yes, come down. Will you come down? Just make sure I haven't got too many. How many more do we need? Would you come? Is anyone? I think on the side there, you should come down. Yes, do. Quite a complicated. We've never played this before, so I have no idea how it's going to work. While they're getting organized, the problem that they're going to be settled with is to make a French flag. That's the problem that they're going to be set. Okay. I want to tell you now, you are cells in an embryo. And your problem is to make a French flag. Now, how are you going to decide how to do it? Think about it. You can talk to your neighbors. I don't want you to talk to anybody else if you want to talk to your neighbors. You can think about it. Each of you has a blue piece, a white piece, and a red piece of cardboard. You better take off the elastic. You haven't even looked at what you've got in your kit yet. You've got blue, white, and red. And your problem is that when I tell you to decide which cardboard to hold above your head, because there's a camera way up there which is going to look down on you, and then you're going to, well, we hope you're going to look like a French flag. So, have you decided which piece of card you're going to hold up? Only talk to your neighbors, no overall organizers, please. Okay? Have you decided? Well, I'm not going to give you any more time. Hold on now. Stop talking for the moment. Hold on. Now, when I ask you to decide which piece you're going to put above your head, and please do it carefully because you're very close packed, And I don't want someone to put somebody else's eye out if we can avoid it. Okay, are you ready? Hold it above your head, please, now. Or carefully, carefully, slowly, slowly, slowly. Well, I want to tell you, it's not... Okay, you can put it down now. You can put it down. I want to tell you, I think you did extremely well. Hold on, we're not finished with you yet. Can I just ask you, how did you decide what you were going to do?
Because I knew the French flag was red, white and blue, and there was 6 squares long, so 2 had to be red, the middle 2 had to be white, and the other 2 had to be blue. So I decided that, as I was in the middle, I had to put the white up.
Perfect answer. and I'm impressed. Is that how all of you try to work it out? So what you were really doing, some of you got it wrong, I want to tell you. I'm not going to say who, but some of you did get it wrong. That doesn't matter. That's like a little mutation. Things go wrong during, that's not a mutation, that's a little developmental abnormality. Now, what you can see is that therefore, if you know your position in the line, yes, you know where you are in the group as a whole, you all have exactly the same possibilities, you can form the French flag. Shall we do it again, just to see if you can all get it absolutely right now? Because just remember, just look what numbers you're on, because you're going to remember. Can you all remember what number you're on? And just remember, if you're 1, 2, 7, 8, 13, 14, 19, and 20, then you're going to be blue. If you're 3, 4, 9, 10, 15, 16, 21, 22, you're going to be white, and the rest of you are going to be red. Do you want to try it again? Okay, slowly over, please. Slowly. Okay, put it on your head. What a beautiful French flag. Absolutely terrific. Okay, you can put them down. I would never have guessed it was going to work so well. Hold on, we're not finished. I'm now going to make you do something else, which you don't know what you're going to look like. And that's one of the problems of cells. If you say to cells, look, please make an arm, they may say to you, arm? What's arm? I don't know what arm is. All they do is follow instructions. And just to show you that there is no limit of possibilities, 1 to 12 are now white. 1 to 12 white, and 13 to 24 red. All exactly the same set of instructions, but you're behaving according to your position. Are you ready? Okay, nearly. Up you go. And what you've made now is the Polish flag. And thank you very much indeed. You can take it down. Very nice of you. Thank you very much. You can go down. Okay, put those there. But what you could see during that demonstration, that if you have all exactly the same set of instructions, if you know your position, you can form really rather nice, simple patterns. And if you're clever at it, you can do better. You see, everybody in the stand knows their row number and seat number, and provided they follow the instructions, you can make rather clever patterns. Like that. That would be a little bit too difficult to do here, although we'll see at the end. Now, you may well say, that's fine for flags, but we're really interested in embryos. And certainly Frankenstein has no interest in flags whatsoever. If you remember what Frankenstein's interested in, he's interested in making an angel. And if you remember, angels have wings, okay? So what we want to now look at is how one can make a wing. And if we have a look at the early chick embryo here, you can see over here, here's the chick embryo. This is the little wing bud from which the wing is going to develop. It's a rather boring, small structure, lots of cells, all the cells looking very similar, and that's going to give rise to a wing. Here's the eye of the embryo, large brain at this stage. There's a leg bud down here as well, but it's the wing that we're going to concentrate on. And this will develop, this is a 4-day embryo, and over the next 4 days, it's going to develop into a wing. And we've done this very rapidly here, and here is the wing. Okay. Now, let's have a look at that bud under higher power in the microscope. There it is. If you just move that centrally. Oops, the other way. That is the bud, that's the wing bud from which the wing is going to develop. Lots of cells in there, but no matter how hard you look at this stage, you will find no evidence of a wing whatsoever. And our problem is to try and understand, using our ideas from flags, how in fact that can develop into a wing. And I'm going to, if you remember that model, not that a model, that's a real bud under the microscope here. What I've got over here is a drawing or a model of that bud, which I'm going to use to illustrate the principles. And just let me show you what you've got here. Here's the bud, the wing bud of the chick embryo, rather like that here. And what these green squares are, that's just to show you those are going to be the future vertebrae. Those are going to be the future backbone of the chick embryo. And this is effectively growing out from the flank, rather like your own arm. And it's going to develop into a wing. And just let me show you what it looks like, what a wing looks like. And Kenrick over here has got one under his microscope. And let's just have a look and see what it looks like after another 4 or 5 days. Can we have a look at that? It's going to come. That's the bud. Can you focus that? And let's see what there we are. That's very nice. Thank you very much indeed, Kenrick. Oh, we'll come back and look at that perhaps just now. And so that bud that you saw under that microscope, and which I've represented here with a diagram, after 10 days is like this. Just let me show it to you. There's a humerus, very much like your own humerus, radius and ulna, that's that part of your limb, little wrist here, and then unlike your own arm, there aren't 5 fingers, but they're just 3. That's called digit 2. That long one there is digit 3, and this middle-sized one is digit 4. There are also muscles and tendons in here, which I'll come back to later, but which you really can't see at this stage. But in many ways, it's very similar to our own arm. And as a matter of fact, I have here a specimen of an early human embryo from the museum in which you can see that indeed it is very similar to our own arm. And in fact, that little early embryo is in many parts, particularly the arm, is very like that of the chick. And that's one of the reasons, of course, why one studies the development of the chick embryo, because it is such a good model for understanding how our own arm develops. Let's then start looking as to how we're going to think about this problem. And what we have here is the limb bud, and if we're going to think about position, I want to remind you, just like we did, we had a grid on the floor. I'm going to put a grid on here, like that. And what I want to suggest to you is that the cells in this developing limb bud get their position just the same way that the volunteers got their position, worked out their position when they did that demonstration. And we've got to think about 2 axes. We've got to think about this axis there, and we've got to think about that axis there, or that direction there. So we're going to think about how the cells in the early limb bud might learn their position, and then, using their knowledge of their position, make the limb bud that we saw under Kenrick's microscope. Make a limb that really looks like a real limb. And how are we going to actually do that? I'm first of all going to think about this direction here. The up and down one as far as this board is concerned, up and down. And what we think, or the way we think, and this is actually a subject in which March and I actually work, the way we think that this happens, the way the cells get their position, is that there's a special group of cells down here. They look the same as any of the other cells, but they actually produce a chemical. They make a high concentration of a chemical in that region there, which diffuses in this direction along the limb bud. And let me show you what I mean by that. Here we've got some potassium permanganate in the bottom of this dish. It's at a very high concentration at the bottom. And as we move up, the concentration gets less. So high concentration at the bottom. As we move away from the high point, the concentration gets less and less. And the idea is then that cells perhaps could know their position by measuring the concentration of a chemical, measuring how much of a chemical there is. And so I can illustrate that. If this is the normal limb, and this region over here is making a chemical, then that's where the high concentration will be. The high concentration will be down this end, and as one moves away from here, the concentration will get less and less. And so we can imagine that at a high concentration, we make digit 4, at a lower concentration, digit 3, and at the lowest concentration, digit 2. Okay, that's the model. Now the question is there any evidence for it? And now one can do an experiment. And the experiment we're going to do is to put in another high point of the concentration. So what do? Is we go along to another embryo. We go along to another embryo, and I'll show it to you in a moment. We go along to another embryo, and we can take out from that embryo another region like this and graft it in there. And let's have a look at this here. Here's the egg being opened for the operation with a little dentist drill. And then the shell is very carefully removed. It's a difficult operation. It's not to remove the shell, but to do the actual operation. To take out that little piece and then graft it in that position there, is really quite difficult. Now, here, that small region which we think has got the high concentration of the chemical is being loaded onto a little spatula. And you'll see it in a moment in the dish. There it is. That's the little piece that we're trying to graft. It's very teeny. You can see how small it is in relation to these forceps. It's pushed onto a needle and then taken over to the embryo in which we want to put it. There it's going into the embryo that we want and being pushed in to the limb bud. And exactly that is what I've done here, but much easier, because all I have to do is that. So I've now got 2 of them. And of course, this concentration here is going to change now, because we, of course, have 2 sources of the chemical. We've got, I'll show you, let me put this up. We've got a source of the chemical here. The concentration gets less towards the center of the limb, but then begins to rise again because we've got a new source of the chemical here. So we've got 2 sources, one up here, then less down here, and then another high point here. So how is this going to actually alter the limb? Because if you think about it, these cells here that were originally at a very low concentration, if they're measuring their position with respect to chemical concentration, have a completely new environment. They've been given new positions. And let's actually have a look at what it actually looks like. We have it under the microscope here, and there it is. Lovely. This is actually an operation that Amata herself has done. And what do we have here? Here we have the original digits, 2, 3, and 4. And now we have an additional set, 2, 3, and 4, beautiful mirror image digits, because we had that signal that's given this tissue a new set of positions. We also have an ulna, a radius, and an ulna, and just a single humerus. So that fits, if you think about that, that fits quite nicely with our model in which we have a high concentration through low concentration to high concentration, which is exactly what gives you a mirror image there. You may think that this is only relevant to chickens, but it's not. There is a rare human condition in which one actually finds children with mirror image hands. This hand is perfectly normal, but this one is mirror image, and you see this particularly clearly on the X-ray. Here is the center, and you have 3 digits on this side and 3 digits on that side in a mirror image fashion in exactly the same way that I spoke about in relation to the chick. And of course, one doesn't really understand how that happens, but one can begin to understand it, because the way one would think about it is that instead of only having, as normally there is, one such signaling region here, that something has gone wrong in development. We saw things can go wrong in development when you did the French flag demonstration. You've actually got 2 of them, like that. Now, what we'd love to know what this chemical is. And we've tried all sorts of ways of trying to find out. For example, we've taken this tissue, which we think has the chemical in, and we've ground it up in a test tube, and then put the solution or the ground up bits back here to see if it has any effect. And on the whole, it hasn't. But really, with a bit of luck, I'd like to say skill and insight, but it's simply not true. It really was luck. But just let me tell you, one shouldn't disparage luck when one does scientific experiments. If you don't, it's really being prepared to be lucky that really matters. And let me tell you how the luck came about, is that I was talking to a friend in Edinburgh. I was discussing this problem. He said, what about vitamin A? Because that's what he was working on. It seemed an interesting subject. We tried vitamin A, and to our absolute amazement, and quite unexpected, let me show you what happens. If you take a little bead and you dip it into a solution of vitamin A, and instead of putting chick tissue, just put the vitamin A bead there, then you'll see what happens over here. You get almost the same result. You get a mirror image hand, digit 4, 3, 2 of the normal one, and 2, 3, 4 have been signaled by the vitamin A. So at least we have the chemical. It does not mean in any way that vitamin A is the signal. What it means is we can mimic the signal with vitamin A, and of course it gives us a tool to investigate it further. Now let me ask you a question. I want to offer you, I'd like to get your views on this. I wonder what you think would happen if I did the following experiment. This time I go along to the mouse embryo, okay? And I take out of the mouse embryo the same region corresponding to this region in the chick. So I'm taking from the mouse embryo, in fact, I've got a little mouse on here, and I take out this region from the mouse embryo, from over there, and I graft it in over there like that. And the question I'd like to know from you is, what do you think is going to happen? Let's consider the possibilities. One possibility is nothing's going to happen. You know, the signal from the mouse, well, it's going to be quite different. Nothing's going to happen. The other possibility is that you're going to get mouse digits in the chick. And the third possibility, of course, that the signal is the same, and you're just going to get more chick digits. Now, which do you think it is? Nothing? Ah, your cards. No, you're right. Okay. Mouse digits? Interesting, interesting. Chick digits? I want to tell you, you're the lot that are right. And just think why you get chick digits. You see, what this mouse tissue is doing, it's not saying make digits. All it's telling the cells is their position. It's giving a sense of position here, nothing else. It's not saying make digits, not saying make mouse digits. It's not saying make chick digits. All it's doing is altering the positional information of the cells. And for that reason, and what it shows is, of course, that the signals, the messages by which cells may know their position in the limb are the same in the mouse and the chick. And I suppose that's true of evolution. Once you've found a good message that works, stick to it. Don't try and change it. Let's have a look now at the other direction. We've spoken about this direction here. Now I want to look at this direction here. And just let me remind you that the way that your limb is laid down, it's first of all the humerus, then the radius and ulna, then the wrist, and then the digit. So it's laid down in that order. And as this limb bud grows out, that's in fact what happens. You lay down humerus, radius, ulna, and so forth. And the question is, how do the cells know their position? And the suggestion that we have is rather a different one. It's not based, in a way, it involves chemicals, but it does it in a rather different way. We say that the cells in this spotted region here, the cells at the tip of the limb, are measuring how long they stay there. And let me tell you what I mean by that. All the cells in this spotted region are dividing. This region is of constant width, so cells are always leaving here. The ones that come out first have measured the amount of time they've been in there the least. They've been in there the least time, and they're going to be the humerus. Those that come out last, those that have been in the longest, are going to be the digits. So it's by measuring time or number of cell divisions that is actually going to determine the cell's position. Now, I've got a model which is going to illustrate this, and I need a volunteer. But I need someone who hasn't... Have you done something yet? Then why don't you come? What I'd like you to do is come and stand on this side. I don't know your name. Nicholas. Nicholas, that's very kind of you. Nicholas, shall we put these on here first? So could you just pick those up? Yes. Okay. That's what we need, and I need these. Nicholas, thank you very much. Okay, Nicholas, this is we're going to make the limb bud extend, and you're going to multiply the cells. So just let's consider what we have here. We're going to make this here corresponds to that spotted region in the limb bud there. And we've got about 20 balls there. And let's double them up because they're all dividing. So could you pour in another 20 balls in there, please? Do it slowly because otherwise they bounce out. Okay. So that's squeezed out. Just let's make sure what's happened. I'm not counting them exactly. We had 20 in there. They doubled up. So that pushed out 20. So they've been in, they're out now. They're out from the special region here. That's going to form the humerus. Okay, let's do the next one. Let that lot double up. So I just got to open it up. And you can just spread them anywhere, it doesn't matter, because they all get mixed up. That's the next 20 out. And the next one, please. Doubling up again. Very good. Incidentally, these here don't represent anything in the limb, although you can think of them at the region separating the elements. They're just there to keep the balls apart, and so as you can see what happens. Okay, one more lot. We might even do two more. Okay. Very good. Another 20 squeezed out. Should we do one more? What do you think? Yeah, you quite like it. All right, I quite like it too. All right. Show them. It's quite satisfying, really. Don't know why. All right. No, hold on. That's the normal limb. So we saw that these lot came out last. These came out first. That's going to be the humerus, radius ulna, first element in the wrist, second element in the wrist, and here we're beginning to make the digits. And you see these ones here that are going to form the tips of the digit are the ones that are going to leave last. Okay. Now we've got to do an experiment. That's all very well. And the experiment we're going to do is we're going to damage the cells in this region. Okay. Would you pour those in there? You've got to lean over a little bit. That's all right. So, they're going to, well done. Thank you. You better rescue the other ones too. Could you rescue them? Thanks. So what we've got here compared to the beginning is only 2 decent cells compared to 18 lousy ones. So only 2 of our 20 are any good. So we're going to double up. There's a bag of balls up under there, a bag of cells. How many are you going to put in? This doubles up. Only the white ones divide. The red ones can't divide. 2. Could you just put in, no, we've got to put them in there too. So we only squeeze out 2 cells this time. Okay. Now, just look for a moment. We squeezed out 20 cells there for the humerus the last time. Because we've damaged so many, we've only squeezed out 2. It's going to be a terrible humerus, absolutely terrible. Okay, we've now got, could you double those lot up, please? You can just throw them anywhere. No, there were 4 in there, so you've got to put in another 2. Okay, so we squeeze out 4. Oops, okay. And could we do it again? You must count how many there are in there and squeeze them out. How many white ones? Okay, I'll open it up for you a bit. How many was it?
8.
8, lovely, if you could just... Well, there was probably only 7 because we took one out. No matter, that's about right. Okay, so I've got to get 7 out, that's 6. I got it right there. Whoops, I'm having to... well, no, let it... We can afford to lose a cell or two. It's no importance at all. Okay. Once more. Well, things are getting a bit better, and you notice it's repopulating. Let's do it once more. You'll have to count up. How many are there? 3, 6, 9, 11, please. And I've got to get 11 out now. I've got things wrong. I forgot to bring my barrier. So that's 4, 5, 8. It's about that. Okay. Now look what's happened. Although these are terrible, filled with lousy cells, at this stage here, if we did this one now, it would be almost normal. In fact, we've only got one lousy cell left in there. And so, I don't know whether you'd agree, but the prediction is that if we damage the cells in the very early limb bud, yeah, then the structures up here would be lousy, but by the time you get to the hand, they should be pretty good. And if you go back to your seat, we'll have a look, and thank you very much indeed for that. That was very kind of you. We can actually have a look at what the experiment shows. And what the experiment is to use X-ray radiation on the very early limb bud and to have a look what it develops into. And what X-ray radiation does, it stops the cells dividing. And if we want to have a look at the result of that experiment, what we have here is once one's irradiated the limb, instead of getting a whole limb like this, one simply gets a hand which is joined up onto the embryo just at the shoulder. These structures are missing. Now, that's really quite important experiment because it's probably one of the few models we have to understand what happened to children whose mothers took thalidomide. In the 1960s, there was a drug known as thalidomide, which everyone thought was very good for pregnant mothers because it removed the nausea and calmed them down. But unfortunately, it led worldwide to or certainly in Britain, particularly to the birth of about 300 babies whose arms were very deformed. And I have a photograph here. And you can see, if you look at this child here, it's virtually just a hand, but a more or less normal hand, growing out of the shoulder, of just the kind that I've been speaking about. Now, the model that I've given you is a possible explanation for that, because if thalidomide damaged the cells in the early limb bud, that's exactly what you'd expect. But I must emphasize that nobody still understands exactly how thalidomide works. It's a very difficult problem. And it's one of the peculiarities of thalidomide that it works at very low concentration on man, and if you try to get the same abnormality in animals, it simply doesn't occur. And there's no real way at this stage, the nature of developmental biology is such that at this stage we have no real way of predicting which chemicals are really going to cause abnormalities of that kind. I'm now going to seek your advice yet again on an experiment, not your advice, your opinion, as to what you think is going to happen when I do a particular experiment. And the experiment that I'm going to do relates to the leg and the wing, okay? And just remember that there is a leg bud and there's a wing bud, and just let's have a look over here. We have here an early embryo, and if we just hold it here, if we just take, we're going to take a piece of tissue from the leg bud here and take it all the way through to the tip of the limb bud here, like that. And the question is, if we just hold that there, the question is, how is it going to behave? Let me explain to you what I'm doing. I'm taking a bit of tissue from the leg bud of the chick embryo, which will normally give rise to the top part of the leg, to the thigh, and I'm grafting it to the tip of the wing bud. And here is such a piece of tissue taken from the leg, and I'm going to graft it to the tip of the wing. And the question is, how is it going to behave? Will it remember its old friends? Will it keep its legness? Will it make structures up here, or will it make structures down there? Now let's ask, do you think it'll still form leg structures or wing structures? Leg? Or do you think it's going to now form a wing structure? Wings, you think it'll form a wing structure? No, it's decided to be leg. Its career is committed to leg. So it's going to form a leg structure there. Okay, there's no way you could have really known that. That's rather like the eye. It's a question of when the cells become committed. Okay, but do you think it's going to keep its position? Is it going to form a structure corresponding to this position or that position? Well, do you think it'll form a structure corresponding to its old position? Yes? Or to its new position near the tip? Who thinks it's going to be a new position near the tip? Who thinks it's going to keep its old position? Well, more the voters, you voted correctly. It's going to form a structure. It's going to form a leg structure, but corresponding not to this part, but to that part of the leg. So what's it going to form? It's going to form a toe. And that's exactly what it does. And here's an experiment where it was done in America, from the leg bud to the wing bud, and here is a toe. There's the toe at the tip of the wing. So it remembered its legness, but changed its position. Okay. I told you that there were, in addition to the cartilaginous elements in the limb, tendons and muscles in there. And now we must have a look at those. And for that, I shall use myself as an experimental object. Because, let me first of all roll up my sleeves. Okay. First of all, let me show you what a tendon is. If you just look, if you move your thumb back like that, if you lift your thumb up like that, do you see that nice hard structure there? Should be nice and tough. Can you feel it? There. And in fact, that forms what some people use as a snuff pouch. It's quite nice to use that as a little snuff pouch, if you take snuff, that is. That tendon is like a string going from the tip of the thumb all the way back to a muscle down here. When you move your fingers, it's due to muscles contracting down here and pulling on the strings which attach to the tips of your fingers. And to demonstrate that even more clearly, I need a volunteer who I haven't used. Have I used you before? Will you come and do this? Now, I wanted to do, I'm slightly nervous about this because you're going to give me an electric shock. So you come in round here. Don't change the controls. What this is only a battery, really, but it can give one quite a nasty little shock. And what I'm going to get you to do is to stimulate my arm. I'll tell you where. We'll put it on, and what we'll do, just let me see where we are. We'll turn it down slightly, if you don't mind, to start with. And what I'm going to do here, this is what you're going to press onto me, and I'll tell you where to do it. I should really just get my arm a little damp. And what I want you to do, so in order to make a contact, if you put it about there, I'll tell you what it feels like. You press on there. Yeah, that you can take it. Can I just tell you what you do? No, I've kept it low so far, so it's okay. You just press and then take away, because otherwise, I'll turn it up a little. All right? No, it didn't work that time. Try again. Yes. I'll turn it up. You saw that shoot up. So did I. We'll do it a little bit more. Okay, once more. Not too hard. Don't press hard. There we are. I'll be very brave and turn it up a little bit more. No, it didn't work. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. What we've got to try and understand is how these muscles and tendons develop. Oops. And what we've got here is a model of the human arm. And you can see here, remember when I showed my tendon here, and you've got it too, if if you just look along here, there's a nice tendon from that thumb that runs all the way down here to the muscle, which you very kindly stimulated for me, right down here. And you can particularly nicely see it with the fingers. You can see it particularly nicely. There are these long tendons running back here, long way to these muscles here. Now, we're not interested so much in their physiology, but of course how they develop. And the question is, will these tendons develop if the muscles aren't here? Or somehow does the presence of the muscles make the tendons develop? Or is it a bit like sculpting by numbers? Do you make the tendons, the muscles, and the cartilaginous elements all quite independently? And then do they all just join up in a convenient sort of way? And let's try and do an experiment to find that out. Okay. The way to do that is the following. Is one can take the tip of an early limb bud, an early chick limb bud, and graft it to the side, to the flank of the chick. And what it does when you do that is that you'll just get a hand there. You'll just get a little hand sticking out of the chick like this. And then you can ask, are these tendons, and there are tendons in the chick just like in ours, are these tendons there? Will these tendons there be there, even though there are no muscles to go to? And then you can go back to here and say, will the muscles develop in here, even though there are no tendons for it to attach to? And the answer is yes, they will. These tendons and these muscles initially will develop completely independently, one of the other. However, while they'll do that early on, unless they join up, then they'll disappear and they won't grow properly. And just think about the problem. How is it arranged that your muscles are the right length? Remember, your muscles start off very small. And how is it that your muscles are the right length in relation to the rest of the limb? And the reason is that as the bones grow, tension is put on the tendons, which pulls the muscle, and it's the pulling of the muscle that actually makes it grow and extend. And so in that way, growth is coordinated. But initially, they're made quite independently and just little local rules for joining up. Let's have a look at that. Now we've seen the arm, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at some other animals, at least 3. And here we have a Shetland pony's arm or leg. It's 4-leg. And what you can see is it's not unlike yours. Well, it may not seem like yours, but it really is like yours. And here, for example, is a fused radius and ulna. Here's the wrist. And here's a central digit that corresponds to that one in U. That's the one there. So what's happened to all these others? And what has happened in evolution is they've disappeared, and you can just see fragments of 2 of them. There's one there, and there's another one there. They've disappeared in evolution. And what's happened in evolution is that the animal has gone up onto 3 toes and then almost lost 2. So it really, in order to run fast, is decided to run effectively on 1 toe. And so what evolution has done is modified the basic pattern of the 5-fingered hand. And you can see this again, a different variant, and that's a bat wing. And what you can see there is that it's very similar to our own, but that the digits are very long. And of course, they need to be long in order to support the bat's wing. And that's a common theme through evolution, taking a basic structure and modifying its basic pattern, partly because cells in different positions grow to different extents. And one rather dramatic example of that is this fossil, the pterosaur, a flying reptile with this enormously long digit. That is digit 4, just one single digit compared to these rather teeny ones here. Now, I can say with confidence, great confidence, that I think that this was laid down as a small digit and grew a great deal. And why I can say that with great confidence is that there is no chance of us getting hold of a pterosaur embryo in order to show me that I'm wrong. But there is another way of thinking about development. I've been really concentrating on position, but there is another way, and that relates to waves. You see, it could be, and it's one of the things that I'm working on myself, that the way the digits, part of the mechanism for making digits, is having a wave of chemicals in which the peaks of that wave correspond to the different digits. And I'm going to illustrate through this, first of all, mechanically, on this Chladni plate here. And what Bryson's going to do is, this is simply a mechanical plate, and we're sprinkling some powder on. And then we're going to make the plate vibrate. And you get a pattern like that. And what has happened is, by stroking it in that way, the plate has vibrated, and the sand has accumulated in the troughs, where there are no waves, because it's been bounced off everywhere else. And this particular pattern is a mechanical pattern, and the sand reflecting where those nodes where there are the least vibrations, because it's been bounced off everywhere else. Now, it's possible, that's a mechanical model, but it actually happens chemically too. And if we could have a look at this example here, here we have a uniform chemical which interacts, the chemicals interacting to give peaks of chemical concentration. And you can imagine, for example, that these peaks of chemical concentration could deposit, that only at the peaks of these could you deposit black pigment. And there's a nice example of that, we think, and I'm going to show that to you. And let me introduce to you, come in. This is Mr. Smith and Sue. Come in, Sue. And she's a champion Dalmatian who has won many competitions. Hello, Sue. And what you can see so nicely on Sue are black spots, none on the tail, but lots on the head, and you see rather randomly arranged, just in the same way that those chemical waves appeared in rather different positions. Now, she's got no spots on her tail, but actually it's quite difficult to find animals that do have spots on their tail, because it's one of the peculiarities of chemical waves that when you get something long and thin, it's very hard to get a spot, and things tend to turn into stripes, as we can see on this picture of the lemur, which is quite nice, quite rather unlike Sue, really. Probably not good for a competition.
The Dalmatians do. There are the occasional Dalmatians that do have spots.
They have spots.
Oh, yes.
Very special for Dalmatians. Jolly hard to make a spot on the tail. Thank you very much, Sue, for coming along and showing us your lovely spots. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. And just to show you that chemicals can do this, have a look at this sequence here, in which just quite simple chemical solutions are squirted into a dish, quite uniform concentration, but they interact with each other, and you'll see what happens. And this is known as the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction. So just squirting in chemicals like that, and then you get beautiful chemical waves developing. These are differences in concentration. And as I say, one of the things that I'm particularly concerned with at the moment is whether a mechanism like that, in addition to knowing your position, may not be very important in determining where your digits are. And you can see the waves going out. And I think it's a very counterintuitive idea that making just a uniform concentration of a chemical can lead to wave-like patterns of this form, and rather like the plate that we've seen there. So what I hope now that Frankenstein's been paying very good attention to what I've been saying, and that he's realized how important position is. But of course, we've just simply made the assumption today that there are red and white and blue cells. And in tomorrow's lecture, I'm going to talk about how cells become different. So that's all I have for today, except that I want those 24 people I would like to come back, those volunteers, to come down to do one final demonstration. Thank you very much.